Hello, my name is Eric Williams, and I wanted to welcome you to the December 2014 UCS Tech Talk. Today we're going to talk about a new product called IMC Supervisor that we released this month. Let's go ahead and start with introducing the panel. We've got myself, Eric Williams, Technical Marketing Engineer for UCS. We'll kind of go from left to right. Arun, if you don't mind, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm the engineering manager on this product and part of the team developing this in Bangalore.
Okay, Brad?
Yeah, my name is Brad Tarek. I'm a data center architect focused on UCS software.
And Jeff?
My name is Jeff Foster. I'm the technical marketing engineer responsible for IMC Supervisor.
Great. Well, thanks for the panel for joining, as well as thanks for everyone watching live and watching the recording here in the future. So let's start off with talking about the product itself. So Jeff, I want to start off with you. I know we're here to talk about a new product we've released called IMC Supervisor. It'd be great to get a quick overview of what it is, and just to give a little bit of background for those who may have not heard yet of this particular offering Cisco has started releasing.
Sure. IMC Supervisor is a platform that is specifically developed to help customers manage our standalone C-Series and E-Series servers and provide basic capabilities include fault monitoring. So customers have that single dashboard to capture faults across multiple systems and multiple geographies and to filter those faults into their own defined groupings. Secondly, we support platform inventory, so users will get visibility into the platform attributes and very detailed information for components like the Cisco VIC and the RAID controller. Third, the system supports host power controls and virtual KVM launcher, so you can power on or off the system and launch a KVM. Fourth is firmware management. So not only can we understand from the platform which firmware versions are running on the system, but we also have the ability to update those using our non-interactive host update utility capabilities embedded in the IMC. And lastly, we support email alerting for critical faults.
So it has a good array of different features focusing on different elements like inventory faults and some level of configuration management with some firmware work. So Brad, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the customer view of what kind of drove IMC Supervisor. Can you tell me a little bit about the market and why what type of customer might be interested in utilizing IMC Supervisor?
Yeah. IMC Supervisor really provides a tool that enables centralized management for standalone C-Series and E-Series servers located across multiple sites. Supervisor was developed to focus on robo or remote office, branch office customers, retail customers, agency customers, small and medium business type customers. But that said, there are other use cases identified that really fall outside these as well. But it really works. I think the simplest way to put it is it works for really any standalone C-Series or E-Series customer.
So what are the issues that IMC Supervisor addresses for those particular customers? Why would they really want to have that? What was the compelling event for Cisco to develop this?
Well, it provides a centralized view of the standalone servers with basic management capabilities, which residing across multiple locations and potentially scattered across the world. It gives customers insight into really what's going on with these distributed servers, and it allows customers to perform basic management activities, especially customers managing small number of servers across a large number of sites, all delivered and initiated from a centralized interface.
Oh, very good. So what part of the portfolio is supported with IMC Supervisor? So what C-Series and E-Series servers are we going to be able to manage and monitor with this tool?
Okay, I'm actually going to share my screen here and show you that. So the supported or qualified platforms are the C series M3 and M4 servers, and you can read through the list here yourself. The C220, C240, M3 and M4, the C22, and the C420, as well as on the E series side, the EN120E M2, the E140S M2, etc. I think you can read this list, but this is a pretty comprehensive list going forward.
Are there any prerequisites to monitor these systems?
Yeah, you must. First of all, the IMC must be online and accessible from the IMC Supervisor, and the XML API has to be enabled. The minimum firmware versions are for the C series 1.54 and later, and for the E series 2.3.1 and later.
So when you say it must be online and accessible, it means that there's some customers that may have not configured IMC at all, and they just manage the server without some out-of-band baseboard management controller, again, our IMC. So that you mean they have to have an IP address either configured through DHCP or static address, and have it online in some management or production network, correct?
And the XML API has to be enabled.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
So if if you think about in terms of scale, again, across the environments you talked about, the robo environments, more of just a traditional data center environment. That could be some smaller environments or some larger environments. What's the scale look like for IMC? How many servers can I manage?
So today, IMC Supervisor supports up to 1,000 managed systems.
Oh, interesting. So it's a pretty good size environment that you can manage with just one instance of IMC, correct? That's just one OVA that you deploy and be able to manage that 1,000 systems.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. You look at Cisco has other offerings like UCS Manager, UCS Central, those types of things. Can you compare and contrast the differences and the different management paradigms between IMC Supervisor and some of the existing offerings like UCS Manager and Central?
Sure. If we think about UCS Manager, that really brings together server, storage, and networking management functions through a single interface. It brings the roles together. UCS Manager, with UCS Manager-based service profiles, that really enables stateless computing for the data center, kind of allowing the admin to apply a software-described personality to a physical server. So there's architectural differences around the state machines or FSM, the DME, etc. But the C series IMC has a very robust management controller. It supports integrations like this one, through the XML API. It does not really offer as tight an integration as you get with UCSM. So the approach we've taken with IMC Supervisor is really more appropriate for managing distributed servers across a broad geographic region. This helps really operationalize the key features, including firmware updates, monitoring, inventory collection, some of those features.
So just to clarify a bit, you're saying that with UCS Manager and UCS Central, it has a bit more, a lot more of that capability with the FSMs or those task sequences that make sure that when you make a change to a policy or a profile or something, it figures out the steps to go from current state to desired state, being the desired state, that change you just made. Where IMC Supervisor is a bit more of just using the API and getting getting inventory and faults and those types of things, and not doing a more task sequence based approach to do configuration change management like UCS Manager and Central with policies and such, correct?
Right, and when we talk about that desired state with UCSM, that software model, where it's actually looking at the difference between the software model and the actual running state and applying a sequence of events with UCSM. Whereas with C-Series, it's actually executing, it's actually configuring the device directly through the XML API.
That's great. I mean, that's a good clarification to understand the differences between why you'd want to manage servers with UCSM versus potentially C-Series.
Yep.
So I want to switch over and talk to Arun a bit about a little bit more of the detail that Jeff alluded to about the different sets of features. So I know that platform monitoring is a key feature for this particular release. Could you share with myself and the audience a little bit more information about what types of information is available in IMC Supervisor and what kind of data and, that a potential end user of IMC Supervisor would get?
Yeah, so talking about monitoring data, one of the key elements of monitoring is the fault data. And so the fault data is pulled out for each of the systems that is being monitored with IMC Supervisor. When you talk about fault data, in addition to that, we have the detailed fault list and the history of the faults as well. So we call it a fault table history. So that is also available along with this. In addition, we have a couple of the key logs that are available on system, like the cell log, the system event log, and the IMC fault log. All of this data can be pulled out. And in summary, all of this together kind of represents the key elements that you would need in terms of troubleshooting the system. And IMC users can pretty much use this to troubleshoot and isolate issues to a particular system. On top of that, the last ability we have is the ability to export the detailed tech support from the system into a remote location for additional level of debug that you would want.
So what about IMC's inventory? What kind of information are we gathering through that API about the server, to get information about what's running onto it? What type of information is there?
Yeah, so per system that we monitor, we kind of pull out data about the system, and we get into specific components as well. For example, the processor, the memory, the adapters, the network adapters, the VIC adapter, and more details about it. And in addition, we do get TPM inventory as well. That is the first level of data that we pull out. In addition to that, what we do is kind of deep dive into some of the components that we can pull secondary level data about. Things like the VIC adapter, we get into details like the VNICs and the VHPAs on it. And similarly, on the on the storage side of it, the RAID controller, we get into the into details in terms of physical drives and virtual drives as well. The interesting thing about the data that we pull out is each of it is available like a report, and these reports can be customized to kind of include what level of fields that you want. For example, customers can choose to turn on or off fields that are getting reported, as well as customers have the ability to kind of export the data into various formats like an XLS or a CSV file or a PDF for an offline kind of use.
So that would like if a customer wanted to be able to get all of the NICs on a particular set of servers, then they can get that kind of information and see exactly the MAC addresses or worldwide port names on the HBAs and get that from a central point of view. That's great.
Absolutely.
So when we're pulling this inventory, I know we're pulling it through the DirectXML API on the SIMC itself. Can you talk a little bit about how often this fault and inventory data is refreshed and kind of how it works a bit under the covers?
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, we do use the XML API to kind of pull out this data, right? And because it's kind of a polling mode of operation, so what we do is we kind of go and pull the data every 15 minutes in terms of the fault data. And when I say fault data, it's not kind of restricted only to the fault, but the system health status in some sense, right? In terms of how well the server is functioning, is it operational, for example. That data is refreshed at every 15 minutes, for example. But the other data that we talked about, which is the inventory data, right, is queried in a more I would say a slow fashion. So it's more like every 24 hours that we kind of refresh this data. But the key thing to note is when we take this server and we add the account or we do a discovery, right up there in front, we go and pull this data for the first time. And then these intervals that I talked about kick in.
No, that's great. I mean, it would make sense. How often are you adding configuration or hardware to the system? So refreshing that on a daily basis makes a lot of sense. But getting the state of the actual adapters or the elements within that server on a more iterative basis, so I can see exactly how things are working in my environment, on a more real-time or near real-time basis. In this case, every 15 minutes makes a lot of sense. So, what level of host management capabilities are available through that IMC Supervisor? What can you do without having to launch that SIMC directly?
Right. So in terms of host capabilities, what we do is we do have capabilities in terms of powering on or powering off the server, be able to do a host shutdown, for example, do things like hard reset, launch the KVM. I mean, that is interesting because you can get into the console and get into the server itself in terms of the KVM. We can do a host power cycle, launch the web UI. I mean, do a bunch of things, including say enable, disable the locator LED, and even doing things like setting the server label, for instance. All of that capability exists in terms of a host level operation that you can do.
No, so you can really do a lot without having to launch that SimC UI. There's a lot of stuff that you can do and see and get information about. So now that now that you've touched on this, can you tell us a little bit more about how we're communicating with the endpoints? Are we doing things through SSH, SSL, XML API, or a little bit more of all of those?
Yeah, so what we do is we kind of stick to the fact that we want to use the API to kind of talk to the server. So we strictly, pretty much most of the data that we pull out is strictly on the XML API and is already available via the XML API. We do not use mechanisms like SNMP gets and sets. We do not use the SNMP trap mechanism, for example. And we definitely do not use the CLI mode to kind of fetch this data. So this is all strictly lying on top of the XML API that we have.
Great. So I think it'd be great to actually see this in practice, to show a little bit of a demo of what this looks like and what are the capabilities of that. I know that's something, Jeff, that it'd be great if you can show a bit of really what this looks like underneath, in practice.
Sure. Let me bring up environment here, and what I've prepared here is just a quick demo of there we go, of the environment yesterday, just to highlight some of the monitoring, inventory, and management capabilities that we have in IMC Supervisor. So the first thing we're going to do is log into the system here. And upon login, you're greeted by a number of different graphs. And these graphs are intended to provide you a snapshot of current status of the managed systems. So we can see a listing in graphical form of all of the faults reported across all systems. We can see the state of each of the IMCs. So in this case, we've got some systems that are good, a majority of our systems, but others that are showing a moderate fault, and that's as reported by the system itself. So if you log into the C-Series server and or E-Series server and you're used to seeing that health status in the upper left, that's what we're capturing here. We have firmware. That's the graph in the upper right, showing that we have most of our systems on the latest release, but we do have a variety of other releases available or running on the systems in our environment. In the bottom left, we have the platforms that we're monitoring at current, and then below, I guess middle bottom, we have the power state. So all of our systems at this point are on, and then we have a snapshot not only of the total number of systems under management, but we also have the number of critical faults across those systems. So we have one server with a critical fault. So if we go and look at the servers in a bit more of a graphical view, across the view here, we have not only the platform name, the product ID, the host name, but we also have details like serial number. So if you want to export the data here and look at maybe which servers are and are not under a support contract, or get a snapshot, find a particular server with a serial number that you're looking for within your environment, that's something that you can do quickly and easily from this screen. Additionally, you get status of the various elements of the environment, including a description that you've provided, the firmware version that's running on the system, and far off to the right, and we'll get to this a little bit later, is some of the other details that have been associated with this platform. Now, as Arun had mentioned, we do have the ability to export the values. So we're going to see some of these tables throughout the session. there is an icon there that will allow me to take any of these screens that we're looking at and export those via PDF, CSV, or into an XLS formatted document. So if we close this out, now we can also look, we talked about faults and really providing an aggregated view of faults. Now this screen here is showcasing all of the faults across all of the various systems. And we've identified the server IP, we've identified the host name of the system, the DN, the severity of the fault, a description of that fault, the fault code, the timestamp. So this is really going to provide our customers the ability to go out and not only see what's happening within their environment, but also start to give them some tools that they're going to need in the context of a description to help troubleshoot or help them understand exactly what's going on in their environment. And then the last item, more reports, actually shows some of these graphics in a bit bigger format. I know that this might be a little bit small. It's not quite as small on the screen that we recorded this on, but this will help you understand exactly where your faults are coming in terms of severity. So if we continue on, one thing that we've done is we've actually segmented the systems within our own user-defined groups, and we'll talk about groups here more in a little bit. But I've actually segmented the systems based on Building 2, Building 18, the E-Series servers I have under management, and then we've got some servers out in Amsterdam as well. So you'll notice fewer systems that are highlighted in these graphs, and that's because the filter is being applied in this case for just those systems in Building 2 that we've defined. So it'll really help me as we start to scale, understand or segment the systems and help me understand where I can go to find more details. Now, in the case of the rack server list, we've got a shorter list here. Obviously, we just have a small number of systems in Building 2. And I can click on that server. I have a single click, or I can right-click as I've done here, and I've got all of the capabilities of that system available. So as Arun had mentioned, all of my power controls, the ability to launch a GUI, launch a KVM session, update the LED, or even set the label. So there's a label out on the IMC, and we can do that directly from this interface. So if we move forward here, well, let's go ahead and launch a GUI, and it'll request confirmation of that. And then what's happening here is in a separate tab, we had that web UI pop up. So I'll close that down, and just to show you the another capability, let's go ahead and launch a console. And again, it's going to ask us to submit. Now, in this case, we're launching from the local desktop I'm running on, so we'll download the JNLP just like we would had we actually gone and logged into the IMC. And so we still do have requirements for that Java on the current desktop, but it will launch just as it did without having us go into the IMC and take those additional steps. Now in IMC 2.0, and we covered this in a Tech Talk a couple of weeks back, we have added a number of new capabilities to the KVM viewer, including power controls, chat, recording. And so these capabilities are available directly from the KVM console. We have the ability to attach vMedia, for instance. So in many cases, we were seeing administrators go to the IMC when really what they wanted is access to the KVM, and we've shortcutted that or short-circuited that process for them to be able to launch a KVM session from here. Now, Arun had mentioned inventory. So in the past, we were single-clicking. Let's go ahead and double-click and dive down into, we've got a C420 here. And across the top, we're presented with a number of different options for the various components within the system. At a summary level, you can see the status and summary for each of the major subsystems. So I get a snapshot of what's in the system, the MAC address, the host name, the serial number, all of the details that I might want at a very high level. I get details on the processors. So again, this is a C420. It's got 4 processors. And I get some of the attributes about each of those. I get details on memory, and I get even down to the serial number of the DIMM, but I get attributes of each of the DIMMs in the system. And again, if I wanted to export this data at any point in time, I've got that option up in the upper right-hand corner with the icon. Power supplies, so we can see the state of those supplies. The PCI adapters, so I can see that in this case I've got a Broadcom, an LSI, and a Cisco VIC. And we have a dedicated tab for the Cisco VIC, and that'll allow us to go down and drill down into some of the attributes of the virtual interface card. So we can see here the high-level attributes of the card itself. We also have access to see what are the MAC addresses of those external Ethernet interfaces, and what's the administrative speed, some of those details. We get information about VMFEX, VHBAs, and VNICs as well. So we do get very detailed information about the Cisco VIC adapter. And I can click back on the server and get more information about the various network adapters, the RAID controller. In this case, we have not only information about the controller that's being presented, including the battery backup. In this case, we have a supercap. We can see the number of physical drives, the number of virtual drives. But if I wanted some information about those physical drives, whether it's the state, the size, even the manufacturer, and the type of drive, SSD versus HDD, I can get that. Or I can get information on the virtual drives and the size of those virtual drives and health. So very detailed information about the attributes, the configured attributes of the storage controller. And then the last item, which I don't have installed here, is the Trusted Platform Module, or TPM. But we would also get information, or we do also collect information about the TPM. So if we look at the fault table, and this is a listing of the current faults on the system, it looks like we've got a full cell log. So that's the only state, the fault state on this particular system. But we also have access to the IMC log, and this is the audit log for the system. So we can see all of the authentication against the system, whether they were successful or failed, and some additional information in the event that we wanted to dig into that. We also have the server event log here, and actually I do have the ability directly from this interface to clear the cell logs. So we do have that fault. I'm not going to clear it for now, but I do have the ability. And then finally, we have fault history, and I was using this system to generate faults to show some more interesting information in that summary screen. So you can see here, I was actually playing with fan speeds. And so we actually have a very good historical view of the faults. And then finally, for troubleshooting purposes, if I wanted to upload a tech support file to an SCP, FTP, TFTP, etc. server that's supported by the IMC, I can do that directly from here. So I can facilitate that upload of a technical support file, as Arun had mentioned. So that's if we look at the fault summary and the inventory, that's really what we're looking at. Now, if we go back to the building 2, the other thing that I wanted to highlight, and Arun had mentioned this already, is the ability that we have to customize any of these screens. So we're presenting a lot of data here, and I've actually stripped that down because it was almost, it wasn't the data that I was looking for. So I wanted to highlight the fact that we have data that's not being presented here that can be highlighted on the main screen, including MAC addresses, boot order, BIOS details. So a lot of information is available here on those summary screens. So that's a quick view of monitoring and inventory via IMC Supervisor.
Well, thanks a lot, Jeff. I mean, this was a good overview to see exactly what's what information we're grabbing about all the different standalone managed C-series servers. I think it'd be great to go kind of to that second point you talked about earlier, Jeff, and talk a little bit about the groups discovery and tagging. So, to bring you back into the fold, Arun, I know that I know that Brad was saying that we support around 1,000. That we support 1,000 servers with IMC Supervisor per instance. So that's a lot of servers to be able to manage, and I know Jeff showed that we can do some of those grouping and those types of things a little bit in the first demo, but I'd like to drill into a little bit more around what are other ways that you could potentially manage that many servers.
Right. So one of the things that you can think of is the ability to kind of tag the servers as well. So grouping is one element of being able to kind of view them logically and in smaller sets. The other ability that we have is the ability to tag the servers. Now you could put in logical tags, and you can like kind of group multiple servers together, put tags on them, and then you kind of can quickly search through multiple servers again using those same tags. And that is a great ability to have, especially at the kind of scale that we're talking about.
So it's kind of like how I manage my inbox with Outlook or whatever tool that you use. You can have all of your emails in folders, but also do them in like categories. So then across different folders, I can be able to manage them a bit more independently. So it tags more like a category in that case, correct?
Correct. That's right.
So what kind of tags exist? I mean, and are there any limitations to those tags?
Not really. So the tags themselves can be, any kind of combination of strings and numbers, for example. So it allows you to create these arbitrary combinations that really make sense, for example.
And can you have multiple tags on a server? Like, for instance, if I wanted to create a tag for an Oracle system or Exchange, or I wanted to say this is Microsoft and SQL Server, and I could apply more than one tag to a particular server, correct?
Yes, that's correct. You could apply more than one tag, and then that allows you to create these logical groupings apart from being able to do the groups that we talked about earlier.
And then I have ways to be able to, so from what you said before, they can be created as strings and integers. So then we have the ability to be able to create and manage those through IMC as well. So there's really are there any things like predefined tags, or is it really the user picks what they want?
No, I think the user picks what they want. The predefined tags. The flexibility is all the way moved to the user. You can create any kind of tags and then slap them onto the servers.
Okay. So what about discovery? When you think about pulling 1,000 servers into IMC Supervisor, that could be kind of a daunting task. What are the ways that we can discover both individually as well as group discovery?
Right. So one of the things that we do is support both kinds of mechanisms to be able to add a single server at a time, for example. And also we do this bulk discovery where we go by IP range, right, or by a subnet mask. So you could give a start IP and an end IP and then say, go discover all these servers within this range. And so that is one mechanism of doing a bulk discovery. The other, of course, is to say that this is my subnet mask and this is my IP and this is the mask, and under this, any of these servers are servers that I want to discover, for example. Another interesting mode that we added is the ability to have a CSV file, for example. So you could, maybe you're managing it already with an offline mode in which you have the information about all the servers that you have in a CSV file. So we just take that in and then upload that CSV, and we go boom, discover everything that is under that. The other interesting thing about this is once you set up something saying this is my discovery profile, for example, that discovery profile itself is cached within the IMC. So you could go reuse it. So this is a great ability, for example, because initially you come up with, say, a number of servers that you've added into that subnet, and then later on you go add some more servers. You want to be able to rerun that discovery, and we detect the delta and only import the delta, for example. So that is a good ability to have. And again, while you're doing this discovery, we have the ability to say which group of servers they go into. So if you kind of group the servers up front, and then when you're doing the discovery, you kind of tag them along into these groups so that they go automatically sit into the categories that you want.
No, that's very interesting. Because the way I look at it is probably many people will create create specific subnets for management only. So they may have only consumed 80% of the range at that point, and they want to add more later, and to not have to go and recreate those every time, I think would be a big deal for a customer. So are there any other tools that exist to help facilitate that discovery?
Yeah, the other thing that is a useful ability is we have something called a credential policy, right? So the credential policy is basically the username password that you want to use to kind of monitor and manage these systems. And this is something that you enter one time into the discovery process. And again, like the profiles that we talked about, the credential policy can be cached and reused across multiple discoveries as well. So kind of helps.
No, that's great. So I think getting back to, let's see this in action. Jeff, do you have a demo that we can show some of the grouping and tagging capabilities as well as some of the discovery capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into the next demo here. And this one is focused on, and actually just what Arun had mentioned, the grouping and tagging of various managed systems under IMC Supervisor. So again, we'll go ahead and log in, and we'll see the welcome screen here. And so we talked a little bit about the groups on the left, but we didn't actually get into the menu bar up at the top quite yet. So let's go to the menu bar up at the top, and under Physical Accounts, it will present a number of submenus, one of which is rack groups. And you can see that the rack groups in this list mirror the ones that we've got in the left nav. And it's as simple as creating a group name and a description. And that's all you need to create a group and start configuring servers. Now I can select that group and I can modify it. The only two attributes are the name of the group and the description. And when I go to delete it, I have the option of not only deleting just the group, or do I delete all of the rack accounts within the group? In this case, there's nothing in it, so I'll go ahead and check that box and select delete. But creating groups is very quick and easy, and a fairly easy process across the board in terms of group management. Now I can also add individual systems, as Arun had mentioned, where I'm going to provide information like the account name, and this is the account name that we saw in some of the strains that we were looking at earlier. I'm going to provide an IP, a description. I'm also going to use the credential policy that Arun had mentioned. Now I've got a couple of credential policies already defined, so I'm going to use demo, and I'm going to put this system in building 2. Now, because I'm the contact for this system, I'm going to go ahead and put my name and the location. And I've got a different way of telling myself which rack it's in. We're going to look at that a little bit later. So I'm just going to say building 2. And you can see it's going to go and communicate via the API down at the bottom. And it's in progress. And it takes a couple of moments to validate the platform. But we've created the account now. And it's going to show up here, and you've seen it's added at the last line, information about the system and the last inventory update. You can see from yesterday evening when I captured this, a timestamp. Now, in the case of bulk discovery, it's a bit of a workflow where we have the configure, the discover, and then the import process. In this case, we can configure, as Arun had mentioned, so I can specify if I want to include an IP range, a net mask, a CSV, and I'm going to, in this case, take an IP address, a range, but I've already defined that range. It's the range that I own in building 2, and you can see that that information is cached, and I'm using a credential policy here. So I'll just go ahead and submit that. And this allows me to always go back and select a discovery group. So I've already defined those. Maybe I've added some new systems. I can go and I can rerun the query against all of these systems, and it takes just 2 or 3 minutes to complete. And from there, I see I've got a handful of systems that have been successfully queried, or they meet the criteria. And I can select one or more of those systems, and I can import them into a group. So I've got the default group here, and I'm just going to close because I've already added all these systems to building 2. And then I can clear this list. So I can either keep the list for future use, or I can clear it out for the next discovery. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that out. start fresh the next time I log in. So that's a little bit about how we create a group, how we do single system discovery, and how we do bulk discovery. Now we also mentioned, Arun mentioned credential policies, and those are very straightforward as well. I can add the name of a policy, a description of that policy, and then the credentials that I would like to use against the systems in question. So in this case, I'm going to add my administrative password, and I'm going to cache the test policy. And now I can use that in my future discoveries, whether those are ad hoc discoveries or I create a profile for those discoveries. Now let's go back to building 2, the systems here, and let's look at the servers in this group. And on the right, you'll notice that we have a number of different tags. And these tags are tags that I've created that are interesting to me. And I can manage tags, add tags, and delete tags from the right-click context. Now I'm taking the system 119 that we just added, and I'm going to add a few tags. So I'm going to add a model, and I've defined all the models that I've got. So this is a C240M4. I'll submit that. And I'm going to select another tag. So we support multiple tags per server, and this is going to be in building 2 in San Jose. So I'll add that tag. And lastly, I want to add the region tag. Obviously, this is in Americas, so I'll go ahead and submit the Americas tag. And now I've got all 3 of those tags in the system, and you'll see those show up against the system on the right. Now I've also got a C240 here. Let's go ahead, and I want to add a tag, but perhaps that tag isn't available. So let me go back, and I've got some racks in building 2, and so I want to identify where in the estate this server lives. Which rack ID is it in? And instead of a string, I'm going to say an integer. And I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, or 4, one of my racks. And so this is how I'm going to create the racks. And I'm going to create it in the rack server group. So I can assign it to one of these platforms going forward. And there we've added it in for all of the systems to be able to access. So now I've got rack ID present, and I can add in a tag value. And with that, we will see the rack ID tag showing up in the tagging window. Now this is great that we've got these tags, but what if I want to search based on an attribute? And this can be any attribute that's listed in the table. So you can see there I've searched for Linux. And now if I put in a C2, I can see all the C22s, 240s, 24s. But if I extend that, now I've got C22. I can see that I've got 3 model I've got a few systems that are tagged with C22. But if I put in a C220, I don't actually have a tag for C220, but the product name is a C220. So I'm searching against all of the attributes in all of the different fields. So it is a very easy way to go in and filter the information that's being presented to me in this table without having to search across a large number of systems. So with that, we've covered grouping, we've covered bringing systems into the system, and tagging them. So Eric, back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. So I know one of the other elements that you had mentioned, Jeff, was around firmware management. I'd like to, again, talk to Arun a bit about those. And you know, a big part of managing your C-Series servers, or any servers in general, is the longer-term maintenance after you've done that initial deployment. And a big element of that is, you know, updating firmware, your BIOS, your SIMC firmware, et cetera, to fix bugs and whatnot. So, Arun, you know, given that, you know, we have stated that IMC Supervisor can do some of those firmware updates, can you tell a little bit about kind of how this works and how it works under the covers?
Right. So with respect to firmware management, what we do is we use the embedded non-interactive firmware update capability that already exists in the IMC. So that allows for updates to be initiated and run without any further console engagement, right? So we make an API call pretty much to the backend to update the firmware. While we make that API call, we pretty much say where the ISO itself resides, which is the firmware ISO for that system. And in this release, at least, we go all or nothing. So we do an update all in this case, which ensures that all of the entire system lands up on the latest tested firmware, for example, right? The other thing is, as part of the firmware update, what we also do is we kind of take the ISO files that are available in Cisco.com for the 220 and the 240 M3s and kind of push it and host it locally on the IMC Supervisor itself as a HTTP server, right? So this allows for us to kind of cache the image there for further upgrades for other systems, right? So that is one of the things. The other thing that we do is in systems where we don't have, we also allow, for example, a remote share to be used, like an NFS share or a SIF share. And as part of the firmware upgrade process, we can point to a remote share like this and say, go upgrade. And the use case for this is pretty much a case where the sites themselves are distributed, and we want to use a local share to kind of help the upgrade process be much more smoother, for example.
No, that's very interesting. So really, we're using the existing functionality that people could can use today, but just really driving it from a central point of view and providing some of that error handling and whatnot from a central point of view, from that central tool. And it's great that we can mount the things from a closer filer or closer system to make it so you don't have to mount the ISOs across the WAN potentially in a robo environment. So back to you, Jeff. I mean, it'd be awesome if we can actually show how the firmware works, the firmware management works within the IMC Supervisor.
Sounds great. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things that yourself and Arun had mentioned here. So we'll log in again. We're back to our welcome screen here. And we're going to go this time back to building 18, and we're going to take a look at our servers. And you can see here I've got a server that's running 1.54D. So let's go ahead and let's update that system. Now, to initiate firmware updates, there's a tab down here on the systems page. Now, if I go to firmware updates, I'm going to configure a profile. It's actually very similar to the field that we had just a moment ago. And there's two different options. We can either use the local HTTP server, where we download the image that from CCO, from Cisco.com that Arun had mentioned, or we can use NFS or SIF shares out on a local site. So as Eric, you had mentioned, it's really great that I don't have to pull these images across the WAN. If I have a filer that's out at the same location as these systems, that's going to be something that's more conducive to a firmware update. So I can not only specify the type of share that I want to use or that I want to cache and create a profile out of, but then with the case of HTTP servers, I can actually facilitate the download. So in this case, I'm going to create a profile for the 220 with the latest firmware image, 203F, and I'm going to enter my credentials for Cisco.com. I'm going to select the 220, and then the system's actually going to go out and query what images are available out on Cisco.com. So it's going to present to me a list, and I can go in and I'm going to select the top image because that's the image that I'm looking for, 203F, and I'm going to submit, and it's going to initiate a download, and this will depend on the bandwidth available, but you can see that it's going to update every 30 seconds down in the bottom right. So we're going to give it some time, and we're just coming back to the completion. So very straightforward process to download, again, an image to the Supervisor. And now that we've done that, we want to initiate the firmware update. So we will look at the available profiles, and we'll take the profile that we just created, And we're going to filter that list and just present the 220s. We're going to select the system that's running 154D, the one that we identified earlier. And we're going to go ahead and submit. And as Arun had mentioned, we're going to use update all. And I've fast forwarded the video here. As you can see, I've got the little fast forward icons. But if you were to open the console, there's no requirement to do that. But if you were to do that, you could actually see the status, and we're querying that status. And the status is being reflected in IMC Supervisor, so you can see exactly where you are in the update process. So at the point where the BIOS updates and the system reboots, it will terminate the KVM. And if we go back in, we can see that we were able to successfully update the firmware on this box. So it will report to us not only the intermediate process, but also the final completion state. And if we navigate back to building 18 in this case, where we've got this particular server that was running 154, we highlight that. You can see now we're running 2.03F. So in this case, we've demonstrated not only the different mechanisms that we have to host the images and download the images in the case of the local HTTP share, but also that mechanism to update one or many systems. In this case, I just selected a single system, but potentially I could have selected multiple systems and concurrently updated 2, 3, 4, or more systems from that single image. So Eric, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's great. I mean, it's really good to see a lot of this in action and see exactly what this product can do. So I want to bring Brad back into the fold. I know he's been sitting there very patiently for the past few minutes. I appreciate that. I want to get a little bit of understanding for interested customers. What are really the next steps they should can pursue with this product? I'd like to understand a little bit of something we didn't talk about is kind of how is this product bundled? How hard is it to be able to get it up and running? I mean, we showed what you can do with it, but what's the ramp time to be able to get this product up and running in your environment?
Sure. Well, it's basically delivered as an OVA appliance that you download from Cisco.com. So you download it from Cisco.com, and you can basically land it on any ESX host and start it up. It's pretty straightforward to get going. As far as next steps, I would recommend that you start with an evaluation. Eval licenses are available through the sales team and available through CCW in the coming weeks. So if you need an eval license, contact your sales team right now, but soon it will be available on CCW. And that eval license will allow you to monitor up to 50 servers for 60 days. And so it just takes just a few minutes to get the environment up and installed, and you can be running and discovered and actually using you can actually be managing discovered servers within about an hour.
No, that's great. So, I mean, really, it's not terribly difficult. It probably takes longer to download it from Cisco.com than to actually deploy it in your environment. So.
It's a forehead install.
So what happens at the end of that eval period? I mean, do they have to reinstall, or is it just and does this thing stop working, or is it really just get a real license and then you keep moving forward?
It's pretty straightforward. The system just stops querying all the managed servers and stops updating the fault table. The inventory data stays. There's just no updates to the data. And then normal operations will resume as soon as a valid license is installed.
Okay, so really it's just we just stop monitoring your systems at that point, but we don't delete the configuration that you've worked hard for getting and delete any of the faults. It just stops updating. Oh, that's great. So it's really not too impactful at that point, and you just need to get a valid license and you're good to go again.
Yes.
So what's the availability of IMC Supervisor? Is it available now, or is it something that customers would have to wait for?
It's available today. You can download it today.
Okay, so it's what we demonstrated is nothing future. It's really what's in that first version of the product. So, like you said before, they can just reach out to their Cisco counterparts, their sales rep, or a particular Cisco partner if they use a partner to get more information. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, I want to thank the panel for joining. This has been a really awesome session to see exactly what Cisco's doing around standalone rack server management. I want to thank for everyone that's watched live, our viewers that have been watching live, as well as the viewers that are going to watch here in the future, via the archived copy of this as well. If there are further questions about IMC Supervisor or Cisco UCS in general, I recommend anyone to go to our communities portal at communities.cisco.com/UCS and continue this discussion and ask our panel of experts as well as other customers and partners any questions you might have. Again, I want to thank Arun and Brad and Jeff taking time to do this, as well as anyone that has watched this particular Tech Talk or any of our other Tech Talks. If anyone has any recommendations or questions or things they'd like to see on a future Tech Talk, please reach out to us on Communities, and we can see what we can do to extend more of our Tech Talks to different areas. Again, I want to thank everyone, and go to communities.cisco.com/UCS.